Hey, it's Visual Radio and Everett today. We're going to combine the two shows today. It's April 17th, mid-April already. I can't believe it. Spring is here. We're talking to Lee McColgan today. Hello, Lee.
How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
I love your book.
Thank you.
I mean, I read music books all the time.
Okay.
You know, we have a lot of music people on. I'm in the middle of A Cellar Full of Noise.
Okay.
The Brian Epstein biography.
I haven't read it, but it looks interesting.
Well, he didn't write it. Derek Taylor. It's the Beatles manager.
Okay, gotcha.
And Derek Taylor wrote the book. It's come out now, now that Brian's gone. But I'm reading this, and all of a sudden your book comes in the mail, and it's like, I'm going to interview you. So I dropped Brian for you. I hope you appreciate that.
I do appreciate that.
House Restored. I got so many questions on this, and I'll digress right now. I got a phone call from Eric Taros last night.
Okay.
He works with the Beatles. He helped with that Get Back movie and 8 Days a Week.
Familiar with it.
Lives in Swampscott. He calls me. He said, I have your visual radios from 1995. When we first started this second show of mine. And they're on 3/4 inch. He's been preserving them, mastering them. So he's going to get me a file. And I'm like, wow. Restoration of a house. Restoration of the TV show. It's like restoration is important in this world, isn't it?
It's if all this stuff goes away, I think we lose some of our cultural heritage, if you want to use that terminology. Whether it be a radio show or a TV show, an old house, it's the same idea.
Or even the oil tanks, which are going to maybe be a soccer field. You realize that the Patriots are bidding on this?
I did not know that. No.
Yeah, so all these oil tanks behind us
Okay.
might become the Revolution field.
And that opens up questions of what should be saved and what should go, and does it matter and does it not matter? And that's the topic that I explored in this book. What's the point of saving this old stuff?
So my first question to you is, you were doing financial.
Yeah.
And A, I want to hear about the financial, but B,
Sure.
How do you tear yourself from one world and go into another?
Yeah. So I would say this, if you knew me when I was younger, it would have seemed odd that I was wearing a suit and tie and running around promoting and marketing mutual funds. When I told the people that I knew in the financial service industry that I was leaving that industry to go restore old buildings, they thought I'd lost my mind. But probably who I was as a kid was truer to the person that should be making and building and creating things. And I took a 16-year detour in life, and when you make and create things and you have that passion for those kinds of things, it tugs at you. And I just felt that pull back to doing something, in that area.
Was that world, were you at a desk or were you on the road? Or?
So I started out at Putnam Investments. I don't know if you know the firm.
I've never heard of it.
In the 90s, they were the king in the mutual fund industry. And I started out on the desk. So customer, it was dealer marketing services, they called it, but it was a cubicle, it was a headset, it was taking essentially customer service calls, and ultimately got promoted out into a territory. So I would drive around. It's interesting. Promoting a book and selling mutual funds is quite similar. It prepared me for it didn't prepare me so much for the building end of this, but it prepared me to go out and talk about a book.
It's interesting, isn't it, that there's a lot of connections in life that you don't realize until you're doing something else, and it's, wow, this is interesting.
Yeah, it was Steve Jobs that gave a very famous commencement speech. I think it was at Stanford, but he talked about, you following your gut and making these decisions in the moment, and you don't realize how the dots connect until you're further down the line and you look back on it. And I can certainly speak to the truth in that.
Now, when you do tours like this, there's like libraries here, Everett Library. Do you ever step in and say, "Hi, I'm Lee. I got a new book out"?
So we are. So with the publisher, I've got an in-house publicist, a marketing manager, and then I've hired my own independent publicist as well. So there, we're kind of divvying up the responsibility for outreach. So they're generally hitting the libraries, the independent bookstores. I have lots of relationships with historic societies. and preservation-focused organizations, Historic New England, Historic Boston, Inc., those types of places. So I've been reaching out to those groups. They're reaching out to the libraries, bookstores. Between all that, we're doing radio shows, podcasts, social media presence, the whole thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Your wife is on a board of a historical society?
No, she was, currently not anymore. She was the president of the Pembroke Historic Society at one point. Yeah.
So her watching you rebuild the house and her participating,
Yeah.
and then she's on a historical society, do you find that is like the norm, that people doing it are actually in the historical society? Or are they separate? They're just people from the town that have no idea about preservation?
So I have a friend, his name is Richie Garrison. He used to speak on the subject, historian, he's written a couple books, and he calls it the Old House Fan Club. I just find certain people are just drawn to either the local history of their town, they see the value in saving the historic architecture, or people just don't seem to care. It's not always that black and white. But it seems to me when you get together with folks at a historic society, everyone comes at it a little bit differently, but there's that sort of like-mind appreciation for these older things. My wife grew up with a father who was really interested in historic architecture, and I think that rubbed off on her as I went further and further down the rabbit hole. So this is a funny story. When you get into this, you're always trying to collect this historic salvage. People will take out all these old historic windows, hand-blown glass, and they just throw it right in the dumpster. And you drive around sometimes and you see this stuff on the side of the road, and it's hard to not let that go. You want to save all this stuff, especially when you're restoring these old houses, you can reuse it. And I think all of us have a little bit of a hoarding tendency when you get into it, because they're not making this stuff anymore. In some cases, there's high-quality reproduction, but we're all trying to tame that. And that was something, she get to a point where it's, she doesn't want me bringing home any more of this old salvage stuff, even if I can use it. Where I know that I really won her over, and she really was coming along with the interest in historic preservation, was when I got a phone call. She was out on the road one day, and she said, "Hey, I saw a bunch of windows on the side of the road. They look like they're really old. You should probably go out and take a look." Which I went out and they were. I picked them up. But that's when she would have said, "No more old stuff. Don't be bringing home any more old stuff." And that phone call told me she gets it, at least is seeing it the way that I see it, or it's got the bug a little bit. Yeah.
Well, if you're Steve Jobs,
yeah,
you're not a hoarder, because you have the Hendrix Museum. And if you're not Steve Jobs, you're a hoarder. And that's I hate the term, because someone just called me that. Someone in authority, okay? And because I have
collector.
Vinyl records. Well, I own a record company.
Yeah.
So I have a deal with a store. I don't want to say too much, but I'll just say that I save the records. I pay a lot of money in storage to store them, but the others I give to Savers and to Salvation Army.
Sure.
I don't want to see them destroyed. And like one of my storage people said, "You're not a hoarder. Hoarders have paper cups and receipts." And she sees me giving a Salvation Army. So I'm trying to preserve. I mean, I preserve music, you preserve houses. There's a connection there.
Sure.
And it's interesting. So I'm working with Rob Fraboni. He produces Eric Clapton, the Rolling Stones. And I said, I'm talking to this guy who preserves a house, and I'm thinking how similar we save music. And Eric Taro saves the TV shows, and you're saving houses. And how many of us out there in the world can save everything?
Yeah. Well, so there's to me there's a bigger question there, and it's one I ask myself a lot, and it's one of the themes that I dive into in the story. And some people they find something they're interested in, and they get into it, and they do it, they love it, they do it till they can't do it anymore. And other people are constantly, questioning bigger picture things. And I'm that person that's always asking why. So as I've, dedicating all this time and resource to saving these buildings, constantly in the back of my mind is, why am I doing this? What is the point of any of this? And that was one of the topics that I explored. On a long enough timeline, in theory, it's all going to be gone. On a long enough timeline, a wooden house isn't going to last forever. on a long enough timeline, you and I aren't going to be here. We're going to be gone. So there's this. That's just the deal we get in this world. So there's a bigger question of, what's the point of saving this stuff? Well, so I would be curious your opinion when it comes to saving vinyl records or music. Especially where we've moved to, we can get this stuff digitally. Why save the records? What's the value there?
Let's ask Aki. I just gave Aki a whole stack of records.
Yeah.
He samples.
Yeah.
And he loves this old stuff I'm giving him.
Yeah.
Not only Radio Shack sound effect records, but, Glenn Miller stuff.
Sure, big band.
Yeah, and so he loves the horns. And you can get a microphone and talk to us, Taki, if you want. But the thing is, it's in our blood. The people, Eric Taros and I go way back with Johnny Visnaskis and a crew of other people, Jason Brabazon, Jeep Holland, and we all save the music, right? But Jeep Holland's house, he was a hoarder. The house collapsed. Eric took a documentary of it. It's a sad story because one of us went down. And he's gone now, but it's hard to do it without being Steve Jobs. But we do it.
Yeah.
We just do it, and I'm putting stuff up on Spotify. 331 tracks I got, but I want it all up there.
Yeah.
Just so it's there, and people can play with it.
It's part of, again, there's that, the term gets used a lot, cultural heritage, but these are records of what we've done in our civilization, and if we lose them, I think something gets lost there. I think if they're gone forever.
So to answer your question, I'm going to have you do an autograph.
Okay.
To the David Bieber Archives, where your book is going.
All right.
David Bieber Archives is right near Ernie Bach in Norwood.
Okay. David Bieber?
Yeah, B-I-E-B-E-R. And
right near B-E-R, two B's?
B-I-E-B-E-R, yep.
B-E-B-E-R.
The archives, your book will be going in there now. 10,000 square feet, there's no place like it on earth. We just did a documentary on David. He's an old dear friend. But Ernie Bach has David's stuff in the Wang Center. So if you go to the Wang Center, there is like 3 rooms of David Bieber archives, and now he's got books in there, so I figured we were going to get him an autograph from you. But he's Mr. Preservation. He's got Beatles things. And I said, well, we're doing a book on Fraboni. I need rare Rolling Stones photos. Oh, I got them.
Yeah.
He doesn't sell them. He leases them. So 10,000 square feet of all this stuff. Again, he'll love this because preserving the house. So we have a gift for you here on Visual Radio. See what you think of this.
Thank you. Furniture you can make. This looks mid-century modern. Tell me this. Give me the story.
I think it goes hand in hand with this. It was just in my archives, and it's like,
they got a Windsor. They've got a Windsor chair in here.
There you go.
Thank you.
Now I like how the photos in the book. So if you let me just take Cellar Full of Noise, the Beatles book. See how they have all the photos in one section?
Yeah.
To save money. But your book has them scattered throughout the book. I really like that.
Yeah, it's when you tell people you're going to write a book about restoring an old house, a lot of people assume that it's going to be a big picture book or coffee table book.
Right.
And I wrote this as a narrative. So people, of course, want to see some pictures of the work, but I didn't want that to be the focus of the book. I wanted the focus to be the story. So there's this bigger theme of kind of the impermanence of all things and what's the point of saving old stuff, which I do my best to address. The main thread of the story, it's me restoring this house. I do the work myself, using traditional materials and techniques. And then each chapter is based on one of 6 materials that I identified in terms of materials that would have been used to build a house in the 18th century. So each chapter is about a material, and there's a little bit of history of that particular material, how it was sourced, how it was used, what craftsmen did with it in the time that the house was built. So there's a little bit of history and science, It's memoir, so there's a little bit of my childhood and this connection to being a kid building things out in the woods and why I would want to do something like this as an adult. It's really just an extension of that kid still playing with friends out in the woods, building crude structures out of sticks and pine boughs and stones, just doing it on a much grander scale. And then there's the history of the science, and then there's just a little bit of philosophy of what's the point of any of it. Yeah.
But it's comfortable. You love your house.
I do, yeah. It's love-hate sometimes, but
Still,
always.
Really?
The work is never done.
Right.
It's never done. When you buy an old house like that, you just have to accept that it's never done. It'll never be done. And I guess that's really even a new house. At some point, you're going to have to put a new roof on. At some point, you have to put new siding, new windows on.
Right.
But with the 300-year-old, largely untouched house, the amount of things that can be done are the punch list of items is probably longer than what you get with the standard modern residential house. So it's not for everybody.
And there's so much construction going on today, and it's all prefab.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Well, and I would say this, I come at this I've had my own views and there's what I'm drawn to. I don't come at it as one is right or wrong. It's just a different taste. We have an issue with not enough affordable housing out there. So to be able to prefab a house and build something that's cheap and quick and get it up certainly has a place in the world. Modern construction, there's rhyme or reasons to why we do the things we do. There's a rhyme or reason to why we don't build houses this way anymore. But on the other side of that, there are still things these old houses can teach us. Some of the ways they built, some of the construction methods, I would argue, give you an end result that's more durable than some of the stuff that's coming out of the factories today. If a house is going to last if you're thinking about the environmental or sustainability end of it, if we're building houses that we're going to be demolishing in 100 years versus building houses that are going to last for thousands of years, the materials that were used to create the house have time to replace themselves if we give them that time. If we're constantly building and destroying these things, the housing becomes more disposable, and then what's the repercussion of that? So you can look at all different angles of this. I'm not saying one is right or wrong. I'm just sharing my own opinion on what drew me to a historic house and why I think there's some value in saving it. But there's nothing against prefab houses, modern construction. We're 3D printing houses out of concrete now, if you've seen some of those videos. I don't have any problem with that. There's a time and a place for it. But when I see, a 17th or 18th century house in a town they're becoming more rare, you just get demolished and thrown in a dumpster. I think we lose something that makes our town a little more interesting. There's an academic end to that, to the point of these houses, like a book. They like saving a vinyl record. They tell the stories of whether they're good. Some of these are good things, horrible things. Some of these are, some of the people that lived in these houses did horrible things to other people, and others didn't. But these are our stories, and these houses, just like a book or a record, preserve them. And I just think there's a value culturally to have these stories as opposed to just forget about them and move on.
I'm going to be 70 next month. When I was 15 years old, my dad took me to Locust Street in Medford, where he was forming a new trucking company.
Okay.
All right. So this is Locust Street. So now, flashback like 10 years, where Dad's trucking company was, they put these condos on top of Shaw's. They got rid of Shaw's and put up these condos, and I'm taking pictures of them as it's going up and posting them on my Medford site because I was living in Medford.
Yeah.
And we're watching this construction of all wood, and that's what I don't like about it. And I'm thinking, why don't they dig down like the Porter Square subway station's three stories down?
Yeah.
Why don't they dig down and dig up? Why are they using this flimsy wood, which looks scary? So what you did was preserving this beautiful old house. What they're doing is so, I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way.
Again, some people are drawn to old architecture. Some people want everything new and clean, and it's just a different taste. It's just a different taste. But there is a point where, whether you're drawn to one or the other, some things are just going to be more durable. So I'm someone that there's I'll tell you a quick story. And this is in the book. How much time do we have, by the way?
My show's 55 minutes, so how much time we have, Aki? You can yell it.
I'll just keep talking until you tell me not to talk.
We got 55 minutes to get a show. Where you start 30 minutes ago? And we can keep going. We could do an hour and a half. I don't care.
A number of years ago, I was still working in the financial service industry, and I used to just drive around and have meetings like this, not on the radio, but or on TV, but. And I had a meeting cancel. It was common, just a last-minute cancellation. I had some time to kill, and I pulled into a coffee shop, getting a coffee, checking some emails, and there's an open house across the street. Visitors welcome. And long story short, it was these Buddhist monks that had traveled from Tibet, and they're demonstrating this art of making sand mandalas. And I'm not the expert there. I'm touching the surface level of it. But the gist of it, my understanding, they take this geometric pattern, draw it out on a board. Have you seen this before?
I read about it.
Read it,
in your
yeah.
book.
So they draw this geometric pattern out on this board, and then it's supposed to be representative. I don't fully understand the bigger picture representation of it, but my understanding is some kind of deity or the universe, something bigger than us. And they take these little funnels with colored sand, and they just hunch over this board and just tap them, and they make this sand overlay, and this kind of plain geometric drawing comes to life. And they just demonstrate this all over the world, and people come and they watch them, and it's a little bit of an event. It's like a performance.
Do they glue it?
No. So they just tap it on the board. So this is why I tell you this story.
I Ching.
What's that?
I Ching. They just.
It's when they're done with this, they sweep it off the board, and then they dump it in a river. And then
In a
river, and then they go do it again somewhere else.
But aren't they like precious gems that they're?
It's gemstones, but not just colored, colored stone. Yeah, not precious, just little ground colored stone.
So it's like temporary.
So there's this question of why? what are they doing? What's the point of this? And I saw that, and my understanding, it is to remind them that not on a long enough timeline, nothing's permanent. It's all in a constant state of change. It's a reminder to not get attached to physical things, because if you're attached to a physical thing and it gets lost, you feel a sense of loss. It's painful, and it's just a kind of endless therapeutic exercise of creating things and destroying things to just accept this impermanence of the world. It's fascinating, right? I didn't know that was out there until I happened to be in between a meeting and just walked in and saw this and learned a little bit about it. I bring that story up, and I opened the book with that story because I thought about it. I saw this, and then it's kind of in the back of my mind, and then I went on to, years later when I got into this thought of these monks doing this popped into my head. I came back to it. And I came back to it because I realized I do the opposite. When I build something, it's just my nature. I don't know why, just how it is. When I make something, I want it to last. When I buy things, I want them to be of a high level of quality. Nothing is more frustrating as a craftsman to go buy a tool, and it's poorly manufactured, cheap tool, and you go to use this thing and it breaks. Or in 6 months, it's just junk and you throw it away and you got to go buy it again. I want to buy something that's going to last a long time, so I don't have to buy it again. And that's just me. Some people don't care about that. So it's my nature to want to make things that last. With houses, I don't want to. I'm trying to save them. I want them to be around as long as they can because I think they make our towns more interesting to have these old historic houses. I think they tell us stories, and I'm sad when we lose them. So I'm doing the opposite of what these guys are doing. And there, again, there's no right or wrong. This is where you get more philosophical about this stuff. But that's where I had this thought of, why do I care? If the neighbor down the street buys the 17th century house and demolishes it, it's not my house, it's not my property. Why do I care? And that was really the opening question to explore, what's the point of saving this stuff? And that's what I attempt. There's no right or wrong. I give you my perspective on why I think preservation matters, or there's value to it.
All right, so the great Jimmy Miller said to me, he produced Gimme Shelter and You Can't Always Get What You Want.
Rolling Stones, yeah.
Right, I was his manager.
Okay.
And Jimmy said to me, there's no right or wrong in record production.
Yeah.
He said it with a twinkle in his eye. Because he meant there is right or wrong in record. You can produce anything. You can just put the microphone up and produce it, and that's what he meant. That's all good. But then there's Jimmy Miller's gold standard.
Yeah.
And that's what he meant. And so you got the gold standard of making houses. I think there is a permanence. So it begs the philosophical question: if Aki wasn't taping us right now, would our show go out to the cosmos anyways and just keep going and going and going? Or does the black hole chew it all up and eat it?
But so I could play devil's advocate to the standard of music. So this is someone that wants commercial success. So they're thinking at some point, if we're making our living off selling records, at some point this thing has to be a success or we're not going to get paid and we can't keep doing this. So that viewpoint is, yeah, there is a right here. If this thing's a flop, it's wrong.
Right.
Very black and white. But you could argue someone that just likes to make music in their free time because it makes them happy, that never goes anywhere. They just do it and don't even share it with the world. If that keeps them grounded and makes them happy, there's nothing wrong with that either. That's the great thing about anything that we can assign our own meetings to these things. Now, again, there are things where you can draw a line. This is society views this as wrong. There's a right and a wrong. But even some of that stuff, it's subjective. It's flexible. There are two sides to these issues, or it's more complicated.
Well, for Jimmy Miller, it was all about making Gimme Shelter. He didn't think about how many records it would sell.
Yeah. Right, okay.
For Mick Jagger and Clive Davis,
Yeah.
and Ahmet Ertegun, it's how many records are going to sell.
Yeah.
So the different people do different things.
Sure.
And have different motives.
Yeah.
But your motive is pure, and I'd like to think my motive is pure. These TV shows mean a lot to me. I put hours into preparing for this show. Why? I just want it to be right.
Like doing it.
And, and not be saying, oh,
Yeah.
Lee,
And
how many, what's your next tour like?
Well,
I don't want to do that.
I juggle these. I kind of juggle these bigger picture thoughts, and then you juggle the. I have days where I'm fussing over I'm planing some board. I don't like the way it looks, and I gotta, and I'm really micro focused on this little thing, and I'm fussing over that, and now I'm in the weeds. And then I have other days where I'm thinking about the big picture of the whole thing, and I go back and forth with this stuff. And there is a point where there's a practical end of it. Who cares about any of that? I need to make a living and generate income, and clients hired me to do something, and they want it done. We have to get the job done, and that stuff's irrelevant. And there's a lot of that in this book too. There's the nuts and bolts of, I tear this paneling off and I find that a corner of the frame of this house is completely rotten away, and I've got to fix this thing. Otherwise, this house is going to come down on my head. How do I solve this problem? And then I get into the weeds on how they would have framed a house in the 18th century. There's a little bit of a discussion about timber framing. I go out and find a modern day timber framer and apprentice with them and learn this art, and have to come back to the house and kind of put this all together, which is the much more practical end of the book. So there's a little bit of everything. 15
to 18 months, I noticed. You put a time constraint on yourself.
Yeah.
And you're going to these different places, learning these different skills. What's interesting was talking about cultural societies. In Medford, there was a big blow up over the Historical Society.
Okay.
Because the guy running it, I guess, ran for mayor. I know him; he's a really nice guy. And the current mayor, was mad at him and wanted him ousted. So you got this civil war. Meanwhile, myself and someone in this room were involved in a civil war with the TV station in Medford. See, the mayor's got two civil wars going on, the TV station and the Historical Society. And it's all kind of odd. Do you see that in other cities and towns where there's fights over who will run this commission or that?
Constantly.
Wow.
So I guess the lesson with that, anytime you get large groups of people together trying to make decisions, that's politics, right?
Small town politics.
All national politics. It's just groups of people trying to do stuff. You're going to have contentious debates over things. It's just inevitable. There's a good point I would make about that. So I'm working in finance, and I liked what I did. and found my own meanings and why that mattered, what good that work did in the world. Wall Street gets a bad rap sometimes. A bunch of greedy fat cats that just are trying to make money. I'm dealing with financial planners in small towns. They're trying to help people save enough money so they can retire comfortably, and they're helping people. Does the finance industry always have the reputation of we help people? No. Are there a lot of people in the industry that are good people that just want to help their clients? Of course. But it certainly is easier to vilify, people on Wall Street as just they're greedy and they're just in it for money. And there's a lot of that too. I naively got into historic preservation thinking that, people that are doing this kind of work are generally doing this because they don't care about, they're just pursuit of passion, and the money was never the first priority. They're just lucky if they can make money at all doing it. They do it because they love it. And thinking that kind of mentality is going to draw a different character. And there's going to be this sense of community, and people are all going to be working together and kind to each other.
Yep.
And you get into it and you realize it's just like anything else. Some people are arrogant and some people are really nice and kind and help me. I found people that would help me. I found other people that, they were just rude, they were mean, they were nasty. You find some people that the making money is important. That's the most important part of it. It's like anything. You see these contentious debates about how to approach a project. Every big job, you've got the builders and the architects come in, and you got the property managers, and sometimes the town is involved, historic commissions, historic societies, and people are bringing their own different perspective on what the right thing to do is to the table, and that it creates conflict and debate. So I see that same. I just think that's groups of people doing stuff. I see that. I see that probably in everything.
Huh.
Yeah, who would have thought, right? So my mistake was generalizing it all that somehow people doing this work would be different. On the surface, you could say they're different. You see people running around in suit and ties and on their phones all day, or looking at charts and graphs and trading stock. That personality on the surface is different than the builder in Carhartts with holes in their pants and paint and dirty, and they're tearing out old rotten wood all day. But I think with a large enough group of people, you're going to find people are people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, when you worked on the North Street Church, was it
Old North Church? Yeah.
Old North Church
Yeah.
and the Louisa May Alcott House.
Yeah.
Was that before the preservation?
So I was working for this contractor. I've written about him too. He always says, "Don't use my name," so I won't mention who he is. But he's I think a little more private that way. But I started out as a so I bought the house, and then kind of fell into I just went deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. So I did typically in construction it's an apprenticeship, and then there's the sort of a journeyman period. I didn't do that in a real structured way, but ultimately that played out. I did an apprentice with a timber framer, and then I just started connecting with people that worked in different areas in this preservation world, and I would just go work for them and learn the trade and bounced around a little bit. So early on, I was working for a contractor that had some really interesting clients. So those were his clients. The Alcott House. That was a small plaster repair. I didn't have a huge hand in that job. But the Old North.
Where is the Alcott House?
Oh boy, now I forget the town.
Okay.
But I know it was right around the time that Little Women, the movie, was coming out.
Right.
So it was kind of exciting just to be there and walk around, and then the movie comes out, and it was a big budget movie. Who's that actor that lives down on the South Shore? Was in that too. Chris Cooper. It's a local guy. I think he was in that. Anyway, so that was fun. The Old North Church, I had significantly more involvement in the work that was done. We pulled every window out of that thing and took them back to a shop and spruced them up and then put them all back in. And that was and we were on that job for months and months on end. It was also when the pandemic stuff had started, so it was really interesting driving into the city. There was no traffic because we were able to keep working through that. We were fortunate enough that we could keep going because we were in this isolated museum property. No one was there.
Perfect.
But yeah,
it's museum property. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's the Old North Church is there's a functioning congregation there, I believe, as well. But they do tours, and it's obviously a museum property.
Great resume piece.
Yeah. So that was fun.
Yeah.
And we got fun behind the scenes tours. We got to go up in the steeple, and it was really interesting. So I got to do a bunch of that stuff, and then eventually just started taking on my own clients and started doing it on my own, and then wrote a book. I'm taking a break from preservation work. I'm going to do this get out and promote this for a little bit, and then probably get back to it.
Well, one of my questions is, I'm reading the book, and you're so descriptive about the man on the ferry and what he's wearing. Did you keep a diary?
No, I just have I have a good visual. So I mean, maybe it's just being someone that was art. I was an artistic kid. I was someone that, I could look at a picture and copy it, and I have that visual spatial ability. Some people just get that gift. Some people don't. I think generally people are more inclined to be more visual. If you show something someone, they're more inclined to remember it than if they just read it. Or are taught it in a lecture. I think generally tend to be a little more visual. I think some people that pendulum swings much further, so I'm on that spectrum, where I'm just a really visual person, and I just can remember. It's a useful skill for writing. What I would say to that is, I just thought about that experience and sort of could put myself back there and just sort of remembered the visual and then just wrote about it. So I just have that ability, but it certainly helps to go into, now that I'm doing more writing, it certainly helps to go into a scenario with the idea in your mind that, hey, I'm going to write this, because if I was going to write a piece about this interview, I might have just gone and done this interview and left and never thought about it, and then years later I've got to describe Joe and who is he and what did he talk, what was he wearing and what did he look like, and I might not remember any of that stuff. Or I might remember all of it. My memory is spotty that way. Sometimes I have really clear visuals, and sometimes I don't remember any of it. If I go into this and say, I know that I'm going to write a piece about this, well, now I'm looking at you a little bit differently, and I'm thinking about, if I have to describe this guy on paper, how do I describe him? What's his expression? What's he wearing? What are his mannerisms? How does his voice sound? What's the room smell like? Describe this space. I do find that when you go into a situation, if you know you're going to write about it, you're now thinking more. You can pull more of that detail out because you're thinking about it. So a lot of this, I wasn't thinking about writing a book. I just did it, and the idea popped in my head years later. Maybe I should write about this, and maybe that affects what memories are accessed. But I've written some stuff since then where I've gone into it knowing I'm going to write about it, and you can really draw the detail, pull the detail out of it.
You have a marvelous skill, because I'm reading it and I'm saying, wow, this is kind of gets poetic at some points. It's a book about a house. So there's a whole other thing where
Thank you.
You have a natural skill for writing. You should continue it.
Plan to.
Yeah.
To me, creative expression is creative expression. It's fixing a house, making music, writing a book. There are some people that, for whatever reason, they need these outlets to express. They just have to express. It's a form of self-expression, I suppose. And some people just don't. They just don't. And it's, again, no right or wrong. I'm just one of those people that the stuff comes to me and I want to do something with it. If I get ideas, I want to get them on paper. I have an idea, I want to go make something. This stuff just comes to me, and it's constantly. I'm like a conduit for these creative endeavors. And that was a concern, because I didn't have a background as a writer. And by the way, there's a lot of rejection before you get this far, that you have to. I'm someone that learns by doing. I didn't know anything about publishing. I mean, you know a lot about the record industry, I can tell. I didn't know
a lot from interviewing people like you.
Yeah,
a thousand guests. It rubs off.
Yeah, but I didn't know anything about publishing, and I had to learn all that along the way. And so that's the whole story in itself.
Well, I ask my musician friends, and even like Whiter Shaded Pale, Gary Brooker, he's gone now, but he did my show, and how did Whiter Shaded Pale? I knew because it was presented to Jimmy Miller at Island Records, and Chris Blackwell rejected Whiter Shaded Pale and made a big mistake, and he said, well, I chalk it up to like gambling. It was the wrong move, because that became the biggest selling record in England for a while. I asked them, what's the demo that got the deal for Whiter Shaded Pale or Ian Hunter, Mott the Hoople? How did you get the record deal? How did you land the publishing deal?
Yeah, oh boy, it was a long process. Lots of perseverance. There's luck and timing is probably the biggest part of it. I've realized that we love the kind of self-made person story, and I think fueling our own egos, we're inclined when you have some success to think the world is working for me, or this is me, I'm doing this. The longer that I'm around, the more I'm inclined to think a lot of it is just luck, luck and timing. I don't know, who knows why. Do we have to cut here? Do I have a few
No, we
minutes?
get 10 minutes.
Okay. We can wrap it. We can wrap it up with this story. Yeah.
No, I want to have you read too a little.
Oh,
if you
okay.
want.
So let me do a real short version of this story, and then you want me to
Yeah.
read a little bit? Okay, we can do that in 10 minutes. So I early on, I thought I would write it, and then maybe I would just self-publish the thing. And then I started learning more about publishing, and said, well, if I can get paid for this instead of paying for it, how do I do that? And you go down the rabbit hole. And I started reaching out to authors, and I was surprised to find a lot of even best-selling authors. Some of them are more accessible than you would think. Movie stars, Hollywood people, they're just, for whatever reason, the priorities in our society, they're just inundated. They're hard to get. They have to build a wall around them. They're hard to get a hold of. I found a lot of authors are more accessible than one might imagine. So I just started reaching out to authors and was connecting with them. Was trying to learn this, and I won't mention the name, but a well-known history author referred me to a publicist or to his agent, and I didn't know anything about. I did not know what an agent did, and I thought, oh, this guy referred me. Great, this is going to work. And I sent the guy a really early manuscript without knowing. I mean, I made every mistake everything wrong I could have done wrong, and was rejected. And then you have that moment and that stings, no matter who you are. Rejection, people don't like rejection. And there's that moment of, well, do I just give up on this, or does that drive me to work harder? And that pushed me more. So then I went into a rabbit hole to figure out, what went wrong. Let's analyze what went wrong. And I spent a whole year. Everything I read was just books about writing. Stephen King wrote one of the most wonderful books called On Writing. It's one of the. I think it might be the only nonfiction book he's ever written. I've read that a dozen times. I come back to that again and again. If I ever meet Stephen King, I'd be more excited. I love his fiction stuff too. That's the book. I would not have a publishing deal if not for Stephen King's book.
Really? What's it called?
It's called On Writing.
Now, one of our guests,
Memoir of the Craft, I think is the.
Stephen King, got Michael Kimball his publishing deal. He was one of our guests.
Really?
Yeah.
God.
So interesting.
If I could ever, a lot of people like to meet Stephen King, right? I'd love to just thank him for writing that book.
Write him a letter. He's in Maine.
He's one that he's got so much of the stuff coming at him at his age. He probably just wants to spend his time writing with his family. But yeah, so I went back to the drawing board, and then there's a nonprofit in town. I'll give them a plug called Grub Street.
Okay.
And they're a nonprofit that works with writers, and they have consultants. So I revised and learned more about storytelling and masterclass, and got the manuscript to a point where I was more confident that, okay, I have a better understanding of what the heck I'm doing now. And then I hired consultants to essentially, hey, read this and tell me, is this good or is this thing still garbage? Is this just dribble? And when I got to the point that I was getting some affirmation that this isn't so bad, then I went back to the marketplace and started just reaching out to agents. And again, it's that part of it is just agents are getting bombarded with this stuff.
Oh,
too.
yeah. Well, everyone's a writer today.
Yeah, they're getting hundreds
well,
of
like
manuscripts
Jimmy
a day.
Miller said.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong, but there really is. Yeah, and your book is really well written.
Thank you.
So I'll give you that.
Yeah. So anyway, I signed with an agent, and that changed the game, because then when you're they've got the network in the industry. So then when we took it when we tried to sell it, they just had a bigger platform for that.
The agent liked a book on building a house.
Yep.
That's interesting, isn't it?
They what draws people to stories, it's I guess all based on personal experience, right? You like books about music, I can tell. You're a music guy.
I read all sorts of stuff, but see, I did write to some colleagues and said, I'm reading this book on the house restoration.
Yeah.
It's kind of good to get away from music, even just for a healthy perspective on something else.
Yeah.
So what I wanted you to read about was, if you want, the woman who sold you the house,
Yeah.
did she come back and see it?
She so Lydia. So sadly, she passed away. She did come back a few times, which was nice. She had dementia towards the end, so her real mixed feelings about that, because this was a woman that didn't want to let go of that house.
Right.
Her husband had passed away years before. That house, I think, really anchored her memories, and as her memories started to go, it's funny. She started to more confusion even around her daughter and seeing family members. But the few times she came to that property, there were a couple times where it brought her back. Then some of the memories that were fading, she could access them. She could recall them with more clarity. That's another power of a place like that. Just to see that, just being at this property, I get emotional just talking about it. There's this woman that's in her 90s. Her time on this planet is running out. Her memory is going, and she could come to this house and walk around with me, and just go to these places and remember, that's where we did this, and that's where we had the goat. She used to raise goats, and just to see the significance. That's where a house and a property becomes more than just a house. This anchored this woman's memories and life were tied to this place. It was really amazing to see that. But she's not with us anymore.
For me, I'm sorry to hear that. For me, it was.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
That she saw that someone kept it.
She did. And I wrote her a letter that said, my intention is to preserve this thing. I don't want to let it. I want to save it as is. That's the reason she sold it to me.
And that was really nice. So if you want to read that portion or anything you
Yeah,
want.
do you have it turned to that? I just have
don't.
to find that portion.
Yeah.
It might take me a minute to find that. Or do you want I can just read from the top if we want, in the interest of time.
Anything
Let me just
you
read
want.
the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's read the first chapter. I start with an interesting quote, a little more philosophical. The house is not merely a possession or a structure of unfeeling walls. It's an extension of my physical body, my sense of self that reflects who I was, am, and want to be. Karen Lawler. And there's an interesting thought. I mean, the things we own, they're reflections of who we are and what we want to be. So I'll start with just a little bit from the first paragraph. All morning, the sweltering sun had been beating onto the roof. The steel of the crowbar already felt warm. My arm strained, wedging the feathered end of the tool between the seam of two veneered panels nailed to a kitchen wall. With more pressure, the nails loosened, one panel lifting. Cracking, its edges popped open. Particles of dust floated in the air, dancing in the sunlight, tingling my nose, making me want to sneeze. The smell of aged wood, the yeasty aroma of freshly baked bread filled the room. In just 24 hours, guests were arriving. Almost immediately, the house had made life difficult. Inadequate light from small windows made it hard to see. The ceilings hung so low that when standing, the top of my head almost touched the plaster. Door frames hung low, more problematic because their position caused frequent collisions when rushing through the house. If I didn't duck fast enough or had a ball cap on, the brim obstructing my view, my forehead cracked into the wood, which left a throbbing purple welt above my eyes. The door frame at the bottom of the main staircase proved worse, gravity causing me to build up speed while descending, so the impact came at maximum velocity. Bam, you crack your head on those things. I'll stop there, so that's a little bit of it, yeah.
We had Scott Leahy from the Globe on a couple of weeks ago. He has a new book out, a fiction book. And what I tell my authors is you should go on a public access tour reading each chapter of the book at a different station. Then you get your audio book.
You get the whole book out there.
For free.
Yeah. Well, I'll for anyone that's listening or watching, if you aren't the person that sits down and that's the other thing, writing a story about builders are interested, and a lot of people will be interested in the story, but a lot of builders don't have time to sit and read because they're always out there working. So we were able to sell the audio rights to Penguin Random House. So there is an audio book available on Audible and wherever you can get audio books.
Who's doing the audio?
Who read it?
Yeah.
Now, of course, his name escapes my mind, but I actually was interested in. I was interested in reading it, but they had someone that they were interested in doing it.
How much time we got, Aki? 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes? 7 minutes. So we're doing good.
Oh, okay.
No, this has been a fascinating time for me.
Yeah.
Because again, you preserve, and we like preservers. What is your wife doing now? She's not on the historical society.
Yeah, so she does. She is. My wife Liz is. She's an amazing person. I don't know what I would do without her.
You found someone that liked to preserve.
I found someone that puts up with all my shenanigans, all of this stuff, which is not always easy, and just dealing with me, which is not always easy. So I don't know what I do without her. But she does development. So she does fundraising for the AIA, which is the Archaeological Institute of America.
Wow.
Whose their office right now is on Beacon Hill.
Really?
So archaeology is it's a sister to the preservation trade. You get a similar characters seem to be drawn to that. Again, it's cultural heritage through artifacts, objects, telling stories, people that see a value and kind of looking backwards to learn lessons that we can use going forward, I guess would be the point of it.
And we've got whaling museums here. They've got the Swampscott, and you've
New Bedford Whaling Museum. There's one out on Nantucket. I've been to both many times. Fantastic places.
I got Sina Jetta Naslin there. She wrote a sequel to Moby Dick.
A sequel.
A sequel to Moby Dick. Ahab's wife.
Yeah.
And we got her down there at the New Bedford, I think, Whaling Museum.
Yeah. I think they read. They read at one point in the year. They'll read Moby Dick. They'll have people will keep coming. In. They'll pass, but someone will stand at a podium and read Moby Dick, and they'll do the whole book, which is it's a big one.
Yeah, Herman Melville. So that's interesting to have. Then there's a good reason they had Sina there.
Yeah, and there's a Herman Melville. His house, Arrowwood, is in. Now, boy, I'm blanking on the town, but I'll be speaking out there as well. So you can go. One of my favorite things, I did a tour of that house. So it's in the mountains. It's not on the ocean, and that is. So you think this guy is out looking. Okay, he worked on a whaling ship, so he had the experience.
Okay.
But and he based that off of it. There's a true life story about a whale that sunk a ship, and Nathaniel Philbrick. Nat Philbrick out of Nantucket wrote a piece on that, wrote a book on that. It was extremely successful. Ron Howard made a movie out of that story. Cillian Murphy was in it, who just won the Best Actor Oscar. That was called In the Heart of Sea. But so you can visit the Melville house, and one of my favorite things is they have a fireplace poker. And this was his. This wasn't something they picked up at an antique store after the fact. A fireplace poker. So one end is a poker, and the other end is an actual harpoon head.
Wow.
So Herman Melville's fireplace poker was reforged from a harpoon. What a fantastic, unique artifact.
Well, we're going to wrap up. I'm just going to say who preserved the Herman Melville house?
Who did the work there? I don't know. It wasn't me, though. Probably all these houses have had lots of people come through them through the ages, but a real nice job with the preservation out there, too. It's a great place to visit.
Thank you, Lee, for being on
Thank you for
Visual
having me. I
Radio.
appreciate it.
And historic Everett behind us. It was great having you on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for watching Visual Radio Everett today. Thank you, Aki. Thanks to Chris and to Jeff Dearman. And we'll see y'all soon.
All right.